Do you know that feeling when you're on one path in life and then something pulls you in a completely different direction? Well, today's guest knows that feeling all too well, and she followed it all the way from pediatric nursing to becoming a full time writer. Welcome to Discovering Journeys. I'm your host, Sujala, and this podcast is all about exploring diverse journeys, ones that inspire, connect, and open your mind to new perspectives. Today's guest is Hannah Parry, who started out in the world of healthcare, but somewhere along the way, stories took over. And not just any stories. Her work has been longlisted for the BBC Short Story Award, nominated for a Pushcart Prize, and she has written from historical adventures for kids to psychological thrillers for adults. Her latest novel, Breathing for Both of Us, was published in December 2023, and she's got another one, The Baby Exchange, hitting the shelves soon. We are going to chat about how she built a writing career from scratch, about publishing industry, traditional versus self-publish, and AI in this industry. Journeys like Hannah's remind me why I started this podcast. Every journey has something to teach us. If you have ever thought about taking a leap into something new or just love a good bookish conversation, this episode is for you. I hope you take something valuable from it. So get comfy and let's dive in. Hello, Hannah. Thank you for joining me and welcome.
Oh, hi, Sujala. Thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to see you and hear you.
Tell me how you got inspired to take the transition from being a pediatric nurse to take up masters in creative writing.
Both my parents were writers. They were in advertising. They weren't novel writers, but they were copywriters. So they wrote for a living. Um, I didn't ever think that was something for me. It never even crossed my mind. But I trained as a pediatric nurse in my 20s, and my mother died uh, when I was 30. And just after that, somebody asked me to write something for their wedding. They had a wedding album, and I just wrote a little story about how she had met her husband. And they came to me afterwards and they said, "This is really good. You're really good at this." What I hadn't realised is that in my 20s, we used to have things called filofaxes, which had note pages at the back and a pen. It was an address book, really. And I had been writing at the back on my note pages, job where I really felt I was making a difference. And when I had my daughter, we moved out of London and I got a job in a local general hospital, which I wasn't able, after I had her, I was in the special care baby unit initially, but after I had her, I wasn't able to get the shifts that I wanted. And because my mother had worked away from the home all the time, I had wanted to stay at home with her. So I did bank shifts, which are just where you sign up with an agency. So I could do the day shift. So I would be there for her when she got back from school. But at the same time, I was writing. So on the time that I wasn't working full time, I was doing about 3 days a week. So the other 2 days I'd read a couple of books. And it's just ego, actually, Sujala. I just read one book in particular that I thought, oh, this is rubbish. This is rubbish. I can do better than this. So much ego. And a voice in my head went, well, why don't you then? So I thought, right, I blooming well will. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a book. So I had no idea. I just sat down and started writing and it was terrible. But I sent it out and an agent wrote back to me and she said, we quite like this. Can you do this to it? And can you do that to it? And in the end, she didn't take me on, but she gave me enough encouragement to think, oh, I'll write something else. And then as I was writing those books, I thought, you know what, I was very naughty at school. I stopped going to school when I was about 14. I I thought you better go back to school because you need to learn how to do this properly. So when I was, I think, about 40 plus, I went to do a master's at the University of London. Um, and I'd got my nursing diploma. So even though I didn't have any A levels, they didn't know that. They thought, oh, well, she's got a university, she's got a diploma, so we'll let her in to do the masters. But actually, they just got me to write something, and I got in on my writing. But the more analytical things that you had to do, I was hopeless, absolutely hopeless. I failed one module completely, but I passed all my writing, and they taught me to read, and I finished the book, submitted it to agents, and I had some interest, but ultimately nobody wanted it. A lovely editor said to me, she said, I'd love to buy this book, but my boss won't touch it with a barge pole. But that was because it's historical fiction and it's a very small market. And in a way, with traditional publishing, you mustn't ever lose sight of the market. I mean, we can't all sit down and write Harry Potter, but what you've got to be a good writer, you've got to have a great idea, and then on top of it, there does have to be the ability for an agent to sell what it is that you're writing. And it was felt that what I was writing wasn't sellable enough. So I published it myself, and that was in 2012. So that's it, really. So since 2012, I've written one, two, three, four, about 6 books and published, it will be 4 of them.
Do you think your experience as nurse has kind of influenced your writing?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, definitely, definitely. It came out right in the first book. This good the girls. She's the lady who looked after her when she's little has taught her all about the herbs that do this. This is in the 1800s, so that's what they really relied on, all those different herbs to make you better, to get rid of the fever. So there's a lot of that in that book.
Before we further venture out into your journey and learn about more about the publishing industry, I would like you to take us through what happens when a writer starts to write and till the material gets published. What are the different stages?
Writers they we like to say it, writers like to say there's 2 ways. You're either a pantser, which means you fly by the seat of your pants and you don't plan anything, and you write and write and write and write until you've got a first draft, and then you look at the first draft and you pray that most of it is all right and you fill in the bits that aren't. um, and I think then you have the other type who will plan it down to the very last little degree. There's some fantastic writing software. One writing software that I use is called Scrivener, and it allows you to be as pedantic with your planning as you would like to be. Um, Personally, I started off as a pantser uh, because I read a lot. And I think anybody who reads a lot has a sort of neural network of the shape of a story. So you and most well, I I know very few writers that don't read. So most writers they know the kind of what they're looking for, when the midpoint crisis is, when the tension has to increase, that kind of thing. But I structure things now much more than I used to, because I think it saves me time in the end, because it saves me a lot of editing. I like to know that the first draft that I've done is it's going to change a lot. I know that, but it's not going to be as much as it would be as if I had just sat down and winged writing it. The security that it gives me. I like to know especially what my ending is. That's really important to me, and I almost work backwards from the ending, if that makes sense.
Then you write it, you draft it, you have a manuscript ready, and then
Once I've got the first draft, I'll go back through it to see. I've got to read it as a whole, because and then as I will often have written things that I don't realise I've written. So I'm going to go and look at those things, and that tends to be the theme of the book coming out. I never know what the theme is until after I've finished. And then if I'm trying to be really clever, I will try and see what that theme is and polish those bits, because I think those are the important bits. Once I fix that and I'm polishing the theme, um, then I'm also looking at the characters, checking that the characters have got their own character arc within, even if it's just a very small one, that they're doing all of what they're supposed to be doing. Um, and so that could be 2 or 3 more drafts of it changing. And then when I think I've got it as far as I can, I'll send it to I'll either send it to people who I know who are other writers, and it's called a beta reader. They'll read it for me. But a lot of the time I'll pay somebody to read it, not the girl I use to edit it for me because she does something different. I'll pay a proper, kind of like a script editor really, to look at it for me. And it takes about 6 weeks, and it's always really stressful waiting for that to come back, because you're asking somebody to critique your work, but at the same time, you don't want them to critique it. You want them to write back and say, it's,
It's a double-edged sword.
yeah, exactly. But you know what? Nobody's ever come back and said, actually, you know what? It's perfect, which is a shame.
The creative industry, the publishing industry is a challenging one. It takes a lot of patience, lot of wait time, and it's a lot of hard work. The wait is one of the most prominent thing. The uncertainty is another. How did you navigate those? You just don't feel motivated, navigate through those uncertainty waves.
Sometimes I just think back and I think, I don't know how I got through it. A lot of the time, especially with the rejections, is the rejections that are so difficult sometimes. In the early days, I'd just go to bed and pull the duvet over my head and not come out for 2 days. I mean, it was as simple as, well, not literally, but sort of metaphorically. I realised that after I'd had, the way it works is that you get when you're trying to be traditionally published, agents ask to see the full manuscript. You then have to send it out. You hope somebody wants to see the full manuscript, and then when they've got the full manuscript, you're hoping they're going to offer you a deal, a representation with them, and then they have to take it out to publishers. So it's 3 different rejections back to back. Um, and the worst one I had was so the children's books kept having agents who they thought they wanted it, then they didn't want it, then they thought they wanted it, and it didn't actually get near a publisher. So that I sort of got used to that. And I would find after I'd sulked for about a week, my humor, my sort of sense of self would come back up again naturally. And I just think, this is just the way of the world. This is the way of the business. It really helped self-publishing those books because it meant people got to read them and that they enjoyed them. And if I think about what is it that I want more than anything, is I just want people to read my books. I'd love to win the Booker, but it's not going to happen. But what is going to happen is that somebody who I'm never going to meet and people I've never ever met are going to read what I've written and enjoy it. And then they leave me reviews. And if I'm having a bad day, I just go and read my reviews and it just makes me feel so much better. So anybody who's ever read any of my books, thank you so, so much. But the worst one was so I stopped writing children's fiction, started writing adult fiction. My first adult fiction book, which I published last year, got me a really lovely agent, but it was a dark book about the NHS. It was about a woman who's a doctor. It went out to publishers with this agent the week of that our Prime Minister went into hospital with COVID, and all the publishers came back saying, you know what, we really like the story, but it's too dark for us at the moment, as the whole world was enveloped in COVID. It was just not the right place for a dark book about the NHS. So The timing just can't tell you, it couldn't have been worse. And then this lovely agent wasn't able to keep me on because she decided to focus on her non-fiction, so I ended up losing her. So all these, they're terrible at the time, these rejections, but having survived each one, you sort of just develop a really tough skin. I don't have a tough skin, but I do, on the other hand. So when I was submitting the one that's coming out soon, and again, the same thing happened, I was able to look at it a lot more clearly and objectively and say, you know what, I've got breathing, that's out, that's doing very nicely. Why not just put the baby exchange? Let's put that out with breathing, because hopefully those readers who like that, they're going to like this. Clear about my writing, and how I want to run my business. I love the fact that I can publish a book, once I've done the manuscript, once I've got that I can put a book together really quickly. If you go with traditional publishing, you have to wait a year. So if I got a publishing deal today, it wouldn't come out until next Christmas. You know, I'm less seduced by the kudos of it than I was. 10 years ago, I would have said, no, I just want to be traditionally published. But um, I love the control that it gives me. And I love the fact that somebody can just buy my book in 3 weeks' time. I just love that.
That shift is great for the writers, right? Now,
It really is very interesting. I've heard many writers getting representation after having self-published, and you know with the I don't know what numbers they're doing, because actually I haven't really investigated it, but I'm doing all right compared to my traditionally published friends. I mean, I'm not Sunday Times top 10 bestseller, but I'm pootling along. I'm thrilled with that.
your experience, how you felt when your first book got published.
I was just so I think I was just really proud of myself. I was proud of myself, but I was also really embarrassed
Why?
that somebody might read it, at first. I know, but you don't know whether what you've written is going to talk to anybody, or they're going to enjoy it, or um, I think I was far too self-involved, but I'd never put myself out there like that. And I think, most writers are quiet little people. We live in very interior lives, a very quiet, well, I live a really quiet life. But what you've done is you're putting everything you feel on the page, and then you're asking somebody to read it. So it's quite daunting. That I found that quite daunting, conflicted, but at the same time, I was really proud of myself. So that's how I felt.
Then you went on to write short stories, psychological thriller, historical thriller. So, if you have to pick the top three best moments in your entire writing journey, what it would be?
The first book, which is called Winter's Bite, it won the Children's Book Award at a writers' festival that I went to. That was amazing. So that was validation for the first book, and I just thought, wow, that's incredible. I think the second one would be, I wrote a story that I'd had in my mind for a really long time about it's really about 9/11, actually, and my feelings around it. I was born in New York, and my parents lived there for 12 years, so we're very attached to it, as a city. And I remember my dad he just couldn't quite get his mind around what had happened. So anyway, finally wrote this story in lockdown, and it got longlisted for the BBC Short Story Award 2021, and it was in the top 50 out of 1,100 entrants, and these were all published authors. You had to be published to enter the competition, and it was really embarrassing because they had to ring me up and say, "We can't find where you've been published," because I've been published insofar as I've got a story in an anthology that's been traditionally published. So that makes me, does that make sense? That makes me traditionally published. And I had to take photos of it and send them send them to this poor girl who was obviously so embarrassed that she had to ask me. But I said, no, I have been. And they were like, oh, thank you.
It's
Um,
such a relief.
yeah, exactly. That they were exactly. She was so sweet. So I was judged for that competition. I've been judged against my peers. I think the third one would just be the reviews that I've had for Breathing, which is the adult book, because I knew that I loved writing the children's books and people liked those because I knew that. But I didn't know whether I could write adult fiction or not. I really didn't. I thought it was too dark. I thought nobody's going to want to read this. It's not escapist, it's miserable. Um, but having said that, they do like it. And I think that that has made me really happy and given me the confidence to push on with the baby exchange. So I would say that's probably it. Yeah.
The three challenging ones.
That would be the first agent who wrote to me and said, "Oh my god, I with the children's book," and she said, "Oh my god, I love this book. Send me the full. I'll read it overnight and I'll send you the contracts in the morning." And I got up in the morning and she'd written to me. She said, "Sorry, I made a mistake. I don't want to represent you."
Oops.
Was like, okay, that was because that was the first one, right? That was the one where I just couldn't breathe. I was quite young then. Um, the second one, the most challenging.
If you're enjoying this episode, make sure to follow Discovering Journeys so you never miss an inspiring journey. And if this conversation has sparked something in you, consider sharing it with your loved one who might need to hear it, or share it on your social media. Now, let's get back to our guest's incredible journey. And for more details, please check the show notes and our disclaimer. Thank you.
The second one, the most challenging, I think would be just getting writing the baby exchange. Not no, writing Breathing, which is the one that's out now. I brought out last year. I had to write that manuscript twice. I actually wrote two books to get that manuscript into shape, the right shape. Yep. So that had to be written twice. And so that's two books at about 80,000 words each. And then the third one would just be the lovely agent in the November of 2020. So we'd already, bearing in mind Breathing had been rejected by everybody, and I'd written a lovely new sparkly 20,000 words for her to read, and I sent it to her. And she just came back to me and said, "I'm so sorry, I'm just not going to be able to represent you anymore." And I was sitting in the waiting room of a gynecologist, and I read this email from this agent, and I thought, right. And then literally the doctor called me in just as I'd finished reading the email, and she sat me down and she went, "I'm sorry, Hannah, you're going to have an operation."
Oh my God.
So it's not the most challenging thing that's ever happened to me, but it was like, that might be my worst day. You know what I mean? It was just the timing of it was just, you're telling me that, and now it was a very, very small operation, by the way. I shouldn't be a drama queen about it, but it was still, you just think, really, really, is this happening all?
Yeah, in a minute time, yes, it hits you.
Exactly, exactly. So, but I think digging deep in the cold January morning to come up with those 1,000 words that when you would much rather be on TikTok can sometimes be the hardest thing that I do all day. Does that, even though most of the time I enjoy it, there are always going to be some times.
Yeah, it's not every day. You might love everything, but it's not every day you would love to do at every second of your life.
Yes, exactly.
Any funny situations or any hilarious you have come across in your writing journey or publishing industry in any
God,
way?
so many. I mean, I think it's sort of little things like when people leave you reviews, that's what we're all trying to get reviews all the time because that's it builds, and you get some very funny reviews. So you'll get a 1-star review because Amazon didn't deliver the package correctly, right?
Oh, it's not so reflective about your work.
I know, but you have to laugh, don't you? Because I'm looking at the 1-star review and I'm thinking, but that's bringing my average right down, and getting cross. And then another person left a review of the two children's books, which is actually going to be a trilogy. And he said, read all three books. And I've only written two. I haven't actually written the third one yet. So
With your experience in this industry and understanding of how it works, all the small, small things, what is that one thing surprised you about the publishing?
how long it takes, how long traditional publishing move forward is one thing, but then reading itself, reading and making a book as good as it can be is a long process. That is a long process. There's no, you cannot rush that. Um, but the publication lead times, I think I was surprised at how long that take. The other thing is actually how nice everybody is. When I got representation with the one agent, I had to let quite a few other people had the full manuscript, so I had to let them know that I signed with somebody. And they were so sweet. They were so kind. They said such nice things. They were very so. Although it's a very difficult sort of castle to break into.
How does one decide between traditional publishing and self publishing? Because the self publishing has become so famous in the last few years. What is your take on it?
Yes, what used to happen initially was people like me who weren't able to get a traditional deal would turn to self-publishing as the sort of the last resort, or just to be able to put your work out there so that it wasn't wasted. Now what I'm seeing is that young writers who could have a traditional deal if they wanted to, especially, writing fantasy, or they call it romantasy now, sexy fairies, that kind of thing. Um, they are choosing to self-publish because it gives them control over they've got their own platforms. They're very comfortable with the Instagram, TikTok, um, and they want to be in charge of their own. Often they will be writing more than one book in a series, which is a very good way of uh, selling a lot of books. I think it's control these days. I think it's control. And again, the lead times as well. Also, don't forget, if you're selling a lot of books, your royalties are much higher if you're self publishing. It's 75%.
There is this debate that when you have a book and when you go to the traditional publisher, you get to place it across. And while self publishing, to gain that visibility before, especially you are just a first timer or a second timer, you don't have that much of a visibility. So, is it the case, or you convert that kind of visibility via TikTok or Instagram or podcasts? Does it work in self publishing? Can you reflect that?
Yes. Yes. You can't ever cover this traditional publishing. I hope I get this right. They are going to issue a print run for your books. So they're going to say, right, we're going to publish, let's print 5,000 of these books. They will have given you an advance for the book. They have a print run. They distribute it to all the books. So it's there in hard copy on the shelves. So it then has to compete with all the other books in the bookshop. So, which is hard. And then if it doesn't sell well enough, most publishing companies will give you a 2-book deal initially, and then you will have written your second book, and you're going to hope that once you've written those 2 books that you're then going to be offered more. but it might be that you don't sell enough that the publishing company decides not to continue with you. So there's no guarantees there. If with self-publishing you work very, very hard promoting, building your platform, email list, newsletter, so on and so forth, all your books are available through the bookshops. You can go and ask for a book to be for them to order your book. I'm listed in Gardeners, so you can go to a bookshop and ask for my book, but they would have to get it in. So you can't reproduce that traditional publishing in that respect, but you can, nor traditional publishing doesn't allow for you to give away loads of free copies, which would then lead to the spreading of your getting the reviews, getting the attention, getting the platform, building a relationship with your readers. Even though I know some very successful authors who are very good with their readers, but they have the platform as well as the traditional publishing deal. So I don't think you can neglect that connection. I think that's really important.
How does a new writer, somebody who is very passionate, let us not go for a bigger, like a novel or something, just like a short stories or children's book, for example. How can one decide without having any published material beforehand? Which one is the best way, according to you?
I think I would start with short stories because a short story is a small book. It's a story. It's got to follow the same lines as a book and a children's book and even a picture book. It's all the same structure.
Should they self publish or should they traditional publish because they have no experience in this?
It depends what they want to do. If they just want people to read it, I think self publish it. But if they want to build a career, there's no harm in submitting to the tradition to agents to try and get a traditional um, because agents can be incredibly helpful in shaping manuscripts before they go out to publishers, and it might be worth doing that first to see if there's any interest, and then if there isn't, then go the self-publishing route.
Can you mix both?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you
Okay.
can't, not for the same book. No,
Oh,
no, you would need to. So if I each time I write a new book, then I submit to the agents for a traditional deal. Yeah, you can't self-publish it and then hope. Although what is happening is that they're being very successful self-publishing it, getting lots of numbers, and then it's being picked up by the publishing houses and repackaged, renamed, or maybe not even renamed. Actually, I don't know that for sure, but repackaged and put out under, Penguin or whatever it is. Yeah,
what are the common pitfalls the new writer should avoid in this publishing industry?
don't pay anybody to publish your book. Pay somebody to edit your book, absolutely. And there are some fantastic resources out there. Yeah, but don't ever, anybody who says, I'll, publish this for $600 and I'll put it here for you, here and here. It's Don't do that. There is a lot of sharks out there saying that we can get you into this bookshop and we can do this and we'll do that. And actually, I wouldn't even pay. There's a lot of people who say we can give you a bigger platform, we can do all your advertising for you, and I've been contacted a lot by people like that. And I'm not saying that that's not a valid business, but it's probably something that if I have an hour every day, I can do it myself. And one girl was asking $800 a month to promote my book for me, which seems like a lot of money, actually. And I'm not sure. I think it's better for me to do that kind of thing myself. So that's if you're going to self publish, you really need to be on it with your social media platforms.
Coming to artificial intelligence, the AI is being used as a leverage in this industry as well. It could be for an art, illustration, getting, I mean, it even gives the feedback and to generate ideas. So, how do you view AI in this industry?
I've only used it. I tell you what, I've used it for things like I've put bunches of text into. I've asked it to put things into a different tense for me. I've asked it to put it into a different point of view for me. I've asked it, and I think once I asked it to write a letter for a job application. And that it was brilliant at the changing tense and changing point of view, first person, third person, that kind of thing. Just because I just wanted to have a look at what it looked like. I didn't use it, but I wanted to see what it looked like. And for that, it was fantastic. At the moment, I can see when things have been written by AI. I don't know if, if it's getting better and better, and eventually I won't be able to see it. But at the moment, I can see it. So until that's more sophisticated, I think agents and publishers will always know. If you read all day every day, it's kind of quite obvious, really.
I mean, if you ask me, you can use AI as a leverage because I am a software person. I come from that background. So I feel using AI as a leverage in your creative process is fine. But ultimately, AI doing everything is something which is quite debatable.
Yes, I think that's. I love the fact that it can sort of come up with ideas for you. I think when I first saw it come up, I mean, I just thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. I still can't get over the fact that it talks to me and what it can do for me. And I mean, I'm just I'm blown away by it. If I read those books, then I would probably have more of opinion. I'm very unlikely to read those books because there's a lot of other books that I need to read before I die. Um, so I think AI is amazing, but it's never going to be able to. I think I'm probably going to read traditionally written fiction myself, but I wouldn't. If somebody who can master it a lot better and understands it much better than me can get it to do some amazing things, I don't mind that. I think, I kind of think the more books, the better, actually. So I'm not. I suppose I'd probably be really fed up if I lost out to an AI generated short story award. You know what I mean?
Your book is coming out in the early 2025, The Baby Exchange. Give us a sneak peek.
The baby exchange is there's something in called because I've got medicine running through all the books. There's something called a cryptic pregnancy, which is a pregnancy when you don't know that you're pregnant, and quite often you people, and it's 1 in 400, so it's quite a lot. It's about a girl who has a cryptic pregnancy. She lives in Los Angeles. She's a sort of slightly hopeless talent agent. She's got mother issues and she needs money and she needs it quickly. And so she decides to go on a reality television show and have her baby adopted. It sounds completely out there when I say it like that, but I think it was my thoughts about reality television, which I've watched a lot of because I've got a 24-year-old. So over the last decade, I've been watching reality television with her. And but also at the same time, it was the niece of a friend of mine. It had a couple of children I know have had, not children, young women have had cryptic pregnancies, and just what an interesting thing psychologically it is that you know that can happen. And also it's also looking at my own feelings about being a mother. And I think having been mothered quite poorly myself, I was very, very worried about being a mother and how I went on that journey.
Quite an interesting. So, which genre does it come under?
That is what they call upmarket fiction, but it's women's commercial fiction. They call it upmarket fiction because it's probably one step above very commercial fiction.
Coming to the three questions I have for you at the end. How does one decide to write? Should you write what you feel like, or you should write based on what's selling in the market?
I think you've got to do both. I know it's really hard, but okay, if you absolutely forced to make a decision, I think you should write what you want to write because that's where your heart lies. And if that you write what's in your heart, chances are somebody will want to read it. It's very easy to see when somebody has written purely for the market, I think. Um, so if you write from the inside out, that's what they call it. Writing for the market is more a sort of writing from the outside in. That's what I think.
What's one advice or an actionable step would you recommend for an aspiring writer when they feel very low and feel like giving up?
I know. My heart goes out to whoever has ever felt like this, and we all have. I think sometimes it's as simple as you have to step away from the page. You have to just go, okay, that pile of manuscript, that Word document is just, I'm going to put it away and I'm going to give myself a week off. I think giving time is very under talked about. I think often the problems that I have in writing will come to me. A solution will come after about 3 or 4 days, and I'll be doing something really mundane, washing up, walking the dog. Those things allow my subconscious to, if I to bubble up with an answer. If I sit down and I'm forcing myself and getting my knickers in a twist, it's not going to come. So I think stepping away, and even sometimes that you have to step away for a month. And I know people will sit there and go, I haven't got a month to step away, but you'd be amazed what can happen.
What resources can one use while writing for to know list of publishers, tools, websites? What can help?
Yes, the one I would go to for agents and publishers and so on and so forth. It's called the Writers and Artists Yearbook, and it's online. You do have to pay. I think you have to pay £20 for a quarter membership or something, but it's really good. You can keep a list of all your people that you've applied to. It gives you all the most up to date agents, publishers, who's looking for what. So that's the Writers and Artists Yearbook. There is a website called Submittable that's got all the competitions, publications that are open for submissions of short stories, small publishers that are looking for novels. That's not got the agents, that's more for the publications themselves. And then there is for the agents, there's something called MS wishlist, capital S wishlist, all one word. And that is the agents, a very helpful resource because that's agents putting up what it is that they're looking for at that precise moment. And they will often tweet or blue sky or whatever, you'll be able to, and then there'll be a link on it that you can click and you can go and apply to them too. So that's a really good one. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for taking us through this publishing industry and sharing your journey. I've learnt a lot and I wish you the best for the new book which is coming up.
Oh, thanks, Sujala. It's been lovely to chat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Discovering Journeys. I would love for this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to subscribe, rate, and leave a positive review. Share this podcast with someone you think who would appreciate this conversation. Check out the show notes for all the links and details. Until next time, keep embracing your journey and discovering new paths.